Right now, as you're watching this, 47 million American families believe they're about to inherit wealth that will change their lives forever. They're wrong. And by the time they realize it, it'll be too late. 124 trillion. According to Cirilli Associates' 2024 analysis, that's the exact amount set to transfer hands in America by 2048. The media calls it the greatest wealth transfer in history. They're lying. This isn't a transfer. It's a consolidation, a mathematical inevitability playing out in front of your eyes. And if you think you're on the receiving end, you need to understand something critical. You're not watching wealth move. You're watching it concentrate. And there's a pattern to this. A four-stage pattern that has destroyed the middle class of every major civilization that has ever existed. Here's what nobody tells you. This pattern is so predictable, so mathematically precise that once you see it, you can watch it unfold in real time. Stage one, the foundation. A nation establishes a currency backed by something real. Gold, silver, something with actual value. This creates trust, economic expansion, the illusion that it'll last forever. Stage two, expansion and debasement. The government faces mounting costs, wars, welfare programs, imperial overreach. So they do what desperate governments always do. They quietly degrade the currency. They reduce the precious metal content. They print more paper. They promise nothing has changed. Stage three, loss of control. Inflation accelerates. The currency collapses. And here's the critical part. The middle class holding their wealth in that debased currency gets obliterated. Meanwhile, those closest to money creation, the elites, the landowners, the politically connected, they survive. They consolidate. Stage four, the reset. A new currency is introduced. Wealth has transferred from millions to a few thousand. The system restarts. And the people? They never see it coming. Let me walk you through how this machine actually works, because once you see the pattern in action, you can't unsee it. Think of currency debasement like this. Imagine you own a pizza cut into 8 slices. That's your wealth. Now the government comes in and cuts each slice in half. Suddenly there are 16 slices instead of 8. They didn't create more pizza. They just made more slices. Each slice is now worth half what it was before. That's inflation. That's debasement. And if you're holding slices while someone else is holding the whole pizza oven, you're about to get destroyed. This isn't theory. This is documented historical fact that repeats with the precision of a clock. Let me prove it to you with 3 separate examples spanning 2,000 years. Same pattern, same stages, same devastating outcome for ordinary people every single time. Rome, 64 AD. The city is burning. Emperor Nero needs money desperately to rebuild and maintain his grip on power. The denarius, Rome's silver coin, had contained 95% pure silver under Augustus. Nero made a decision that would echo through centuries. He reduced it to 80% purity. That was stage 2 beginning. Most Romans didn't even notice. The coins looked the same. They spent the same. But the debasement had started. 130 years later, under Septimius Severus, that same coin contained just 46% silver. The slide accelerated. Then came Caracalla in 215 AD. He introduced the Antoninianus, supposedly worth 2 denarii, but containing only 1.5 times the silver. Monetary fraud on a civilizational scale, dressed up as monetary policy. By 253 AD, the Antoninianus contained 20% silver. A decade later, just 2%. 2% silver in what was once the most trusted currency on Earth. The consequences were catastrophic. Prices exploded 1,000%. Small landholders who had saved in denarii watched their life savings become worthless overnight. They couldn't pay debts. They lost their land. Meanwhile, the wealthy patricians who held land, gold, and physical assets, they didn't just survive. They consolidated power. They bought up the foreclosed farms for nothing. The Roman middle class was annihilated. And here's what nobody teaches you in school. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't incompetence. This was policy. The Roman elite knew exactly what they were doing. Currency debasement allowed them to pay their debts in worthless coins while accumulating real assets at fire sale prices. Let's verify the pattern. Stage 1, Rome established a trusted silver standard that enabled trade across the entire Mediterranean. Verified. Stage 2, centuries of currency debasement to fund endless wars, massive public works, and an increasingly bloated bureaucracy. Verified. Stage 3, hyperinflation, economic collapse, total destruction of middle-class wealth held in currency. Verified. Stage 4, repeated currency reforms that never addressed the core problem. Wealth consolidated to the elite. Empire weakened beyond repair. Complete. The pattern played out over 3 centuries in Rome, but sometimes it happens much faster. Jump forward to Weimar Germany, 1921 to 1923. After World War I, Germany owed 132 billion gold marks in reparations. That's over 500 billion in today's money, an impossible sum. Germany had abandoned the gold standard during the war to print money for the war effort. They lost. Now they had to pay in gold-backed currency while possessing almost none. The Weimar government made a choice. Instead of raising taxes, which would have been political suicide, or cutting spending, which would have meant admitting defeat, they chose option 3. Print money. Fire up the printing presses and hope nobody notices. Watch how fast this accelerates. In mid-1921, the exchange rate was roughly 60 marks per dollar. By mid-1922, the rate hit 320 marks per dollar. 6 months later, 7,400 marks per dollar. The velocity was increasing exponentially. Then in January 1923, France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland. Germany's response was to print even more money to pay striking workers who refused to cooperate with the occupation. This was the breaking point. By November 1923, one US dollar equaled 4.2 trillion marks. 4.2 trillion. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks at the end of 1922 now cost 200 billion marks. Let that sink in. Workers demanded to be paid twice per day because by afternoon their morning wages were worthless. People brought wheelbarrows full of cash to buy groceries. Families who had saved for generations, who had done everything right, watched their entire fortunes evaporate in months. Life insurance policies that would have supported a family for years couldn't buy a single meal. Anyone holding cash was destroyed. But here's the critical part. Anyone holding land, gold, or foreign currency, they not only survived, they thrived. The wealthy, who understood what was coming, bought up real estate and businesses for pennies. The wealth of millions transferred to a tiny elite in less than 2 years. Apply the 4-stage pattern. Stage 1, Germany operated under a gold-backed currency before the war. Check. Stage 2, currency expansion to fund war, then massive printing of unbacked paper to pay reparations. Check. Stage 3, 2,9,500% monthly inflation in October 1923. Total economic collapse. Middle class wiped out. Check. Stage 4, introduction of the Rentenmark in November 1923. 1 Rentenmark equal to 1 trillion old marks. Wealth consolidated. Pattern repeated. Undeniable. But you're thinking, that was 100 years ago. That was a defeated nation in chaos. That can't happen in America. Let me show you it already did. August 15th, 1971. President Nixon stands before America and announces he's temporarily suspending dollar convertibility into gold. The Nixon shock. Nobody used that word temporary seriously. For 27 years, since Bretton Woods in 1944, the dollar had been pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency was pegged to the dollar. This was the foundation of the global financial system. The dollar was as good as gold because it was backed by gold. But by 1971, America was hemorrhaging gold. The Vietnam War, the Great Society programs, decades of deficit spending had drained Fort Knox. Foreign governments, especially France under de Gaulle, were demanding redemption. They wanted their gold. The U.S. had only 10,000 metric tons left, less than half its peak reserves. On August 11, 1971, Britain alone requested $3 billion in gold moved from Fort Knox to the Bank of England. Nixon had no choice. He closed the gold window. The dollar became pure fiat currency overnight, backed by nothing except the promise of the U.S. government. Within 15 months, Bretton Woods collapsed entirely. Every currency became fiat. What happened next? Inflation. The 1970s delivered stagflation, something economists had said was impossible. Unemployment hit 6.1%. Inflation soared past 5.84% annually and kept climbing, eventually hitting double digits. Those holding dollars and bonds watched their purchasing power evaporate year after year. But those holding assets, real estate, gold, equities, they flourished. The wealth gap began widening systematically, and it never stopped. Let's verify the stages. Stage 1, the U.S. established the gold-backed dollar as world reserve currency under Bretton Woods. Check. Stage 2, decades of deficit spending, war financing, and monetary expansion drained gold reserves and forced debasement by closing the gold window. Check. Stage 3, gold window closes, fiat currency unleashed, inflation destroys savings, middle class loses purchasing power systematically throughout the 1970s and beyond. Check. Stage 4, the current system. Floating fiat currencies, wealth inequality at all-time highs. The pattern repeating again right now, verified. Which brings us to today, to that $124 trillion wealth transfer everyone's celebrating like it's manna from heaven. Here's what the headlines won't tell you. This isn't a transfer. This is the final stage of a wealth consolidation that's been building for 50 years. As of 2024, the top 1% of Americans hold 30.8% of all wealth. That's $49.2 trillion. The bottom 50% hold 2.8%. Total U.S. household wealth stands at $163 trillion. the highest in history. But that number is inflated by surging stock and real estate prices, assets the wealthy hold in massive proportions. The average family holds most of their wealth in their home, which means they have one asset that might appreciate while the wealthy hold diversified portfolios across real estate, equities, bonds, commodities, private equity. When inflation comes, which assets win? Not the single-family home you're barely holding on to. The investment properties, the stock portfolios, the tangible assets the wealthy accumulated while you were saving cash. Here's the part that destroys the narrative. Of that $124 trillion transfer, $62 trillion comes from the wealthiest 2% of households alone. And where's it going? Right back to the top. The children of the wealthy inherit wealth. They have financial literacy, estate planning, tax strategies. Millennials and Gen Z expect to inherit $46 trillion and $15 trillion respectively. But here's the gap nobody talks about. Northwestern Mutual's 2024 study reveals that only 26% of Americans actually plan to leave an inheritance. 1/3 of millennials expect one. Only 22% of boomers and Gen X plan to leave anything. The expectation gap is massive. Millions are banking on money that doesn't exist. They're waiting for an inheritance while drowning in student loans, credit card debt, and unaffordable housing. Meanwhile, the median inheritance for the bottom 90% of Americans is close to zero. For most people, the wealth transfer is a myth. For the elite, it's the largest consolidation event in modern history. And it's happening because of the exact same four-stage pattern. Let's verify every stage for America right now. Stage 1. Did America establish a trusted currency system? Yes. The gold-backed dollar under Bretton Woods was the foundation of global finance for nearly 3 decades. Verified. Stage 2. Has America engaged in decades of currency expansion and debasement? Absolutely. Since 1971, pure fiat currency. The Federal Reserve has expanded the money supply exponentially. National debt exceeds $36 trillion. The Fed's balance sheet exploded from $870 billion in 2007 to over $8 trillion at its peak. Money printing on a scale that would make Weimar Germany blush. Verified. Stage 3, are we seeing loss of control, currency devaluation, and wealth concentration? Undeniable. Real wages have stagnated for decades. The top 1% now controls wealth equivalent to the bottom 90% combined. Inflation has returned after years of denial. Housing is unaffordable for an entire generation. The middle class is being hollowed out in real time. Verified. Stage 4, the inevitable outcome. It's happening right now. This wealth transfer is the reset, the consolidation, the mathematically inevitable conclusion of 50 years of fiat currency expansion. Complete. You're thinking it right now. This time is different. America is exceptional. We have technology, innovation, resilience, the strongest military, the reserve currency. That's what they said in Rome when they controlled the entire Mediterranean. That's what they said in Weimar Germany when they were the most advanced industrial nation in Europe. That's what every civilization says right before the pattern completes itself. But here's the thing about patterns. They don't care about exceptionalism. They don't care about innovation. They care about mathematics. They care about the immutable reality that when you debase a currency, you destroy the savers and reward the asset holders. Every single time. No exceptions in 2,000 years of recorded history. Let me show you exactly how this plays out for ordinary people. If you're holding your wealth in cash, in savings accounts, in bonds, in fixed income instruments, you are on the wrong side of history. Not because you're making bad decisions, because you're playing a rigged game. The pattern shows with absolute clarity that currency debasement always transfers wealth, from those holding the currency to those holding real assets. Land, equities, commodities, businesses, things that cannot be printed into existence. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is monetary physics. When the money supply doubles, the value of each unit gets cut in half. If you're holding dollars while someone else is holding assets, you just lost half your wealth and they just doubled theirs. The $124 trillion wealth transfer isn't a windfall coming your way. It's a siphon. It's a vacuum pulling wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 10%, from currency holders to asset holders, from the financially illiterate to the financially positioned. And unless you understand this machine, you're not inheriting wealth. You're funding someone else's inheritance. The median American family has about $192,000 in net worth. Sounds decent until you realize 68% of that is their home equity. One asset, illiquid, expensive to maintain, vulnerable to local market crashes. The wealthy have their wealth spread across dozens of asset classes, hedged, diversified, protected by legal structures and tax strategies the average person doesn't even know exist. When inflation comes, and it's already here, who wins that fight? Not the family with their entire net worth tied up in one suburban house and maybe $20,000 in savings. The family with real estate portfolios, index funds, gold, foreign holdings. They don't just survive inflation, they thrive on it. Their debts get inflated away while their assets appreciate. So what do? First, stop waiting for an inheritance that statistically isn't coming. The numbers don't lie. If you're in the bottom 50%, you're inheriting close to nothing. If you're in the middle 40%, you might get something, but it won't be life-changing and it'll probably get eaten by medical bills, elder care, estate taxes, or inflation before you see a dime. Second, understand that your savings are being systematically devalued through monetary expansion as you sit here watching this. The Fed expanded the money supply by over 40% during COVID alone. 40%. That means every dollar you had in 2019 is worth 60 cents today in real purchasing power. They didn't rob you at gunpoint. They did it with a printing press and a press conference. Third, position yourself on the right side of the wealth transfer by holding assets that appreciate when currency debases. Real estate that generates income, equities and productive businesses, commodities that have intrinsic value. Position yourself like the wealthy position themselves because they know this pattern intimately. They've been playing this game for generations, while everyone else was told to work hard and save money. The pattern has repeated for 2,000 years. It's repeating right now in 2024 in America. And the only question that matters is whether you're going to recognize it before stage 4 completes. Because once stage 4 is done, once the consolidation is complete, it's too late. The wealth has moved, the reset has happened, and you're standing there wondering what went wrong, holding a savings account that buys half what it did 5 years ago. The machine was built centuries ago. It's operating exactly as designed. The great wealth transfer of 2024 isn't a windfall. It's the endgame of a pattern that played out in Rome, Weimar Germany, Nixon-era America, and is reaching its crescendo today. The difference is, this time you've been warned. This time you can see the stages unfolding in real time. This time you have a choice. Hold currency and watch it debase, or hold assets and watch them appreciate. The pattern doesn't lie. It's never lied in 2,000 years, and it's not going to start now. Subscribe because in the next video, I'm showing you exactly how this machine was built, who built it, and the 3 specific actions you can take right now to position yourself before the final stage completes. This isn't financial advice. This is pattern recognition. And patterns this consistent don't break. They repeat. Right now, the clock is ticking. The question is whether you're going to be on the right side of history when it completes.